Maria was not your typical Jiu-Jitsu student. She was in her 70s, with silver hair neatly tied back and eyes that sparkled with quiet determination. People who first saw her in the Jiu-Jitsu studio often underestimated her. They assumed that her age meant she was fragile, slow, or incapable of handling the physical demands of martial arts. Little did they know, Maria had been quietly training for decades, practicing her moves diligently at home, and attending classes faithfully. For her, Jiu-Jitsu was not just a hobby, it was a way of life, a discipline that kept her mind sharp, her body active, and her spirit strong. Every morning, Maria would wake up early, drink her tea, and stretch carefully before heading to the gym. The walk to the class was never long, but it gave her time to prepare mentally. She thought about her techniques, visualized her moves, and reminded herself that age was just a number. Her heart raced a little with anticipation each time she walked into the studio. She knew that some students were kind, while others were skeptical, but Maria didn't mind. She wasn't training for approval, she was training for herself. As Maria entered the class that day, she noticed the usual sights and sounds. The mat smelled faintly of sweat and disinfectant, and the sounds of slaps, shuffles, and occasional laughter filled the room. Younger students were practicing rolls and submissions, some chatting and joking between exercises. Maria's presence often drew curious glances. Some students whispered, some smiled politely, and a few openly smirked. They had seen her before, moving carefully and deliberately through her warm-ups, but they had yet to witness the full extent of her skill. Many assumed she was slow, gentle, and easy to avoid. Maria was used to this. She never let the whispers or smirks bother her. She believed that true strength was quiet, measured, and confident. She had learned over the years that Jiu-Jitsu was more than just power, it was technique, strategy, and timing. Those who relied only on strength often made mistakes, and Maria had seen countless younger, stronger opponents underestimate her during practice. Time and again, she had surprised them with her precision, control, and unexpected speed. Her confidence didn't come from arrogance, it came from experience. That morning, as she stretched and prepared, Maria noticed a group of advanced students gathered near the center of the mat. Among them was a black belt who had a reputation for showing off. He was strong, fast, and proud of his accomplishments, but he also had a tendency to underestimate anyone who appeared weaker than him. He glanced at Maria and laughed quietly with his friends. "You're too old for this," he whispered, loud enough for others nearby to hear, smirking as if he were joking but fully expecting everyone, including Maria, to agree. The remark might have discouraged someone else, but not Maria. She felt a small smile on her lips, not out of anger, but anticipation. She knew that people like him were always quick to judge. They measured ability by appearance, weight, or age, not realizing that skill could come from decades of dedication, patience, and observation. Maria's mind ran through her moves, considering what she might demonstrate if challenged. She knew her training was more than adequate, and she trusted her body and instincts completely. The class began, and Maria went through her usual warm-ups. She rolled her shoulders, stretched her legs, and focused on her breathing. Her movements were deliberate but smooth, showing the control and balance that came from years of practice. Younger students continued to watch her curiously, some whispering to each other, wondering if she could keep up. Maria paid no attention, her focus was inward. She was aware of the skeptical looks, the doubts, and even the occasional laugh, but she allowed them to fuel her determination rather than discourage her. Maria had faced situations like this before. She remembered times when she had quietly trained alongside younger, faster opponents, only to have them underestimate her and then be surprised by her technique. Each of these moments had strengthened her resolve and confidence. She knew that Jiu-Jitsu was a game of strategy and timing, and her age had given her patience and awareness. She could read an opponent's movements, anticipate their mistakes, and respond quickly and effectively. These skills were honed over years of practice, and she knew that her moment to demonstrate them would come. As the instructor began explaining drills for the day, Maria adjusted her gi carefully, tying it firmly and making sure she felt comfortable and ready. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that she was capable, experienced, and prepared. Around her, students were stretching, rolling, and laughing, unaware of the quiet storm that Maria represented. Her calm presence contrasted sharply with the lively energy of the younger students, and the tension in the room was subtle but noticeable. Something in the air suggested that today would be different, that today Maria's abilities would speak louder than words. For Maria, the challenge was not about proving herself to others. It was about living fully, embracing her strength, and demonstrating what decades of dedication could accomplish. She had trained not for recognition, but for mastery. And in that moment, as she stood quietly on the mat, she radiated a sense of quiet confidence and readiness that would soon surprise everyone in the room, leaving a lesson far more powerful than any words could convey. The Jiu-Jitsu studio buzzed with activity that afternoon, a mix of energy, focus, and the faint smell of sweat and mats. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting patterns on the floor where students practiced their techniques. Young men and women moved quickly, rolling, grappling, and executing submissions with a confidence that only came from years of training. The sounds of exertion filled the room, the slap of hands on mats, the shuffle of feet, and the occasional exclamation of effort. Every corner of the studio seemed alive, but the center of attention was about to shift in a way no one could have anticipated. Maria entered quietly, her movements deliberate and calm. She walked past the younger students, who were stretching or chatting in pairs. Some of them glanced at her with curiosity, others with polite smiles, and a few with the faintest trace of disbelief. Their eyes lingered on her slight frame, her silver hair tied back neatly, and the serene expression on her face. To many, she seemed almost out of place in the bustling energy of the room, as if she belonged to a slower, quieter world. But beneath that calm exterior, Maria carried decades of experience and a deep understanding of Jiu-Jitsu that few could rival. At the center of the studio, the black belt, Marcus, was demonstrating a technique to a small group of advanced students. He was tall, muscular, and exuded confidence, moving with a speed and precision that commanded attention. Marcus had a reputation for being talented but prideful, often showing off in front of newer students or anyone he considered weaker. When he noticed Maria entering, he raised an eyebrow and smirked, whispering something to the students beside him. A few stifled laughs escaped, and the energy in that part of the room subtly shifted. There was a hint of anticipation mixed with amusement, as though everyone was waiting to see what the elderly woman could do. Maria ignored the whispers and laughter. She had learned long ago that the opinions of others mattered little when one was focused on mastery. Her eyes scanned the mat, noting the positions of students, the flow of the class, and the rhythm of the drills. Every movement in the room was like a puzzle to her, each gesture a clue she could use to anticipate the next step. While others were distracted by ego or showmanship, Maria was quietly observing, mentally preparing herself for what might come. The atmosphere was electric. Some students continued their exercises, oblivious to the tension building near the center, while others watched Maria and Marcus with growing curiosity. The instructor called out instructions, guiding students through drills, but a subtle undercurrent of excitement ran through the class. Everyone sensed, even if only subconsciously, that something unusual was about to happen. Maria, with her calm demeanor, contrasted sharply with Marcus' flamboyant confidence, creating an invisible line of tension that drew the attention of every nearby student. As the class progressed, Maria moved through her warm-ups with ease and precision. She rolled her shoulders, stretched her legs, and practiced basic techniques, her movements smooth and controlled. Younger students glanced at her occasionally, noting how steady and deliberate she was. Some whispered to each other, wondering if she could keep up with the more intense drills. A few even laughed quietly, assuming that her age would prevent her from executing the moves properly. But Maria didn't react, she had grown accustomed to skepticism. Her focus was inward, on her breathing, her balance, and her awareness of the room. Marcus, noticing her presence more directly now, couldn't resist making a comment. "Careful, everyone, he said with a chuckle, loud enough for the class to hear, "Don't let Grandma show you how it's done." His tone was playful on the surface, but it carried an unmistakable challenge. The surrounding students laughed, some nervously, some with genuine amusement. The tension in the room grew thicker, a mix of curiosity, disbelief, and excitement. Everyone wondered if Maria would respond, or if she would simply go about her routine, unfazed. Maria's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every step, every stretch, and every glance was a silent message: she was ready. She moved to her designated spot on the mat, positioning herself with calm authority. The younger students and even Marcus found themselves watching more intently now, realizing that this quiet, unassuming woman might be far more capable than appearances suggested. By the time the instructor called everyone to gather for the next exercise, Maria had already captured the room's attention without a word. Her presence alone commanded respect and curiosity. The class that had begun with laughter and casual energy now held a quiet anticipation. Something extraordinary was about to unfold, and no one could predict how quickly the events would shift the dynamic of the entire session. Maria was ready, and the mat was about to witness a lesson in humility, skill, and the quiet power of experience. The class had barely settled into the routine of drills when the moment arrived that everyone had been quietly anticipating. Marcus, the black belt, had been watching Maria from across the mat, his confident posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, assessing every movement she made. To him, this was entertainment, a chance to prove dominance over someone he assumed was far weaker. He didn't yet know that Maria had spent decades perfecting her skills, quietly honing her technique and patience. Marcus leaned slightly forward, addressing the students around him. "Watch closely," he said with a sly smile, "this will be fun." He let his gaze land deliberately on Maria, as if she were a puzzle he intended to solve quickly. His voice carried just enough volume that others nearby could hear. "I hope you don't trip over your own feet," he added, the laughter rippling through the group immediately. Some students chuckled awkwardly, while others shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension that was beginning to build. Maria, however, remained completely still. Her face was calm, almost serene, as if Marcus' words had barely reached her. Yet behind her quiet demeanor, her mind was sharp, analyzing every detail of the room, every movement of the students, and every hint of Marcus' intentions. She had been mocked before, both in and out of the studio, and she knew that people often underestimated her because of her age, her size, or her quiet nature. This was nothing new, and she refused to let arrogance or ridicule disturb her focus. The black belt took a few exaggerated steps toward her, as if drawing her into his spotlight. "Come on," he said, voice dripping with playful disdain, "let's see if you can keep up." The laughter around the mat grew louder, and a few younger students nudged each other, clearly expecting a show of futility. Some whispered bets on how long it would take for Maria to be overpowered. The room had shifted from curiosity to entertainment, assuming that the old woman's time on the mat would be brief and comical. Maria took a slow, deep breath, feeling the rhythm of the room, the energy of the class, and the tension in the air. She had learned long ago that anger or embarrassment only clouds judgment. Instead, she welcomed the mockery as fuel, a way to sharpen her focus and prepare for what was about to happen. She remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing at home, drilling every movement until it was second nature. Today, all that training would not be wasted. Marcus, sensing her quietness as a challenge, smirked even wider. He circled her slowly, demonstrating his superiority with exaggerated movements and deliberate showmanship. "Don't hurt yourself trying," he said, and the room erupted in laughter again. Some students laughed out loud, genuinely amused, while others exchanged nervous glances, suddenly unsure about how this interaction might unfold. Maria didn't flinch, didn't laugh, and didn't speak. Her focus was complete, her patience unwavering. The instructor, standing nearby, watched silently, knowing that this was a moment of subtle tension and potential drama. He didn't interfere, he allowed the exchange to play out naturally, understanding that lessons of humility and skill were sometimes best taught through real-life experience rather than words. Maria's eyes followed Marcus' every movement, reading his stance, noting the angles of his weight, and anticipating the possible openings in his guard. Every detail was catalogued in her mind in a fraction of a second, each piece of information preparing her for the inevitable confrontation. Some students began to whisper to one another, commenting on the boldness of Marcus and the composure of Maria. "She's tiny compared to him," one said. "I can't believe she's actually standing there calmly," another whispered. The chatter added to the energy of the room, a mix of amusement, doubt, and growing curiosity. The black belt, confident and theatrical, continued to taunt, unaware that the very skills he was mocking would soon turn the situation entirely against him. Then, as Marcus moved in closer, preparing to demonstrate what he assumed would be a simple overpowering, Maria shifted subtly, positioning herself with perfect balance. Her calmness contrasted sharply with his theatrics, and in that quiet, measured stance, she radiated control, patience, and readiness. The entire class felt the change in energy, a mix of anticipation, disbelief, and excitement, as the stage was set for a moment that no one would soon forget. The mockery that had filled the room moments ago now hung in the air like a challenge. Laughter and whispers faded as everyone sensed that something extraordinary was about to happen. Marcus, still confident, did not yet realize that the quiet, unassuming woman he had mocked was about to teach him a lesson in skill, patience, and humility that would echo far beyond this single Jiu-Jitsu class. The tension in the Jiu-Jitsu studio had reached a peak. The students who had been watching the exchange between Maria and Marcus could feel it, a silent electricity in the air that made everyone stop what they were doing. The laughter and whispers had faded, replaced by anticipation and curiosity. For the first time that day, the class was completely silent, except for the instructor's voice calling out the next exercise. But even his words seemed to fade into the background. Everyone's attention was on Maria and the black belt. Marcus, still full of confidence, leaned slightly forward, assuming that this challenge would be easy. "All right," he said, speaking loud enough for the entire class to hear, "let's see if you really have what it takes." His smirk was cocky, and he made a show of stretching and adjusting his GI, as if preparing for a simple demonstration rather than an actual fight. Around him, some students chuckled nervously, still convinced that Maria wouldn't be able to hold her own. Others watched silently, sensing that something extraordinary might happen but unsure what to expect. Maria, calm as ever, adjusted her own GI, tying it carefully and making sure she felt comfortable. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the mat, her eyes locked on Marcus. She didn't speak, words weren't needed. Her presence alone conveyed confidence, patience, and readiness. In that moment, she seemed larger than her small frame, commanding the attention of the entire room without a single word. Students who had doubted her moments before now exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that appearances could be deceiving. The instructor nodded at them both, signaling that they could begin. Maria moved first, slowly and deliberately, testing Marcus' reactions. He responded with exaggerated movements, showing off his strength and speed, trying to intimidate her. His taunts and smirks were meant to unnerve her, to make her hesitate. But Maria remained calm, reading every detail of his stance, every subtle shift of weight, and every tiny hint of imbalance. She knew that in Jiu-Jitsu, technique and timing mattered far more than strength or size, and she was prepared to prove it. Marcus made the first approach, thinking he could easily overpower her with a swift maneuver. He lunged forward with controlled force, expecting Maria to falter. But she moved smoothly, anticipating his motion with uncanny precision. Her hands were steady, her feet planted firmly, and her mind completely focused on the moment. In the split second before contact, she saw the opening she had been waiting for. Everything she had trained for over the years, every drill, every technique, every repetition, had prepared her for this exact moment. The class watched in complete silence, some students leaning forward, barely breathing, as the two prepared to engage. Marcus still believed he had the advantage, his arrogance blinding him to the reality of Maria's skill. He underestimated her experience, her ability to stay calm under pressure, and the quiet power that came from decades of practice. Maria, on the other hand, was entirely aware. She could sense his strength and speed, and she knew exactly how to respond to each movement he made. Her strategy was clear: wait, observe, and act with precision. As Marcus launched his first move, Maria shifted her body just slightly, slipping past his initial grip. She countered with a move so precise and calculated that it seemed almost effortless. The black belt's confidence began to waver, though he tried to maintain his composure. Students gasped softly, their earlier amusement replaced by awe and disbelief. In that instant, the quiet, unassuming woman who had been mocked moments before had completely altered the energy of the room. The challenge was no longer just a test of strength, it had become a lesson in humility. The class could see that experience and technique could easily overcome raw power. Marcus realized, perhaps too late, that he had misjudged Maria. Every move he made was anticipated, every opening closed, and every attempt to dominate met with precision and control. The atmosphere was electric, filled with tension, excitement, and growing admiration for Maria's skill. In those tense moments, the lesson was clear to everyone watching: appearances can be deceiving, and underestimating someone based on age, size, or quiet demeanor can lead to surprising consequences. Maria's calmness, confidence, and mastery of technique had turned what began as mockery into a powerful demonstration of skill and resilience. The stage was set, the moment had arrived, and the outcome of this challenge would leave an unforgettable mark on everyone in the room. The room seemed to hold its breath as Maria and Marcus faced each other on the mat. The younger students were leaning forward, eyes wide, some gripping their knees as if bracing for what was about to unfold. The black belt, still confident, stepped toward Maria, his movements precise and fast. He expected an easy engagement, a brief display of his strength to remind everyone why he was at the top of the class. But Maria, calm and centered, was not about to let him dominate, and the energy in the room had already shifted. Marcus made the first move, lunging forward with speed and strength, aiming to take Maria off balance. His body moved with the confidence of someone who had always relied on power to win. But Maria, grounded and alert, shifted her weight just enough to absorb his energy, redirecting it subtly without appearing to resist. Her eyes were focused, calm, and calculating. Every micro-movement of Marcus' body was catalogued in her mind, every tiny shift noted for the precise moment when she would act. The clash of skill versus arrogance became immediately apparent. Marcus expected resistance, but Maria flowed with his motion, almost as if she were dancing rather than defending. Each attempt he made to grab or control her was countered not with brute force, but with technique and anticipation. She was light on her feet, yet firm, her balance perfect, her focus unwavering. The students watching could barely believe what they were seeing. A woman in her 70s, small in stature, was holding her own against a black belt who had humiliated countless others in the past. Marcus tried again, adjusting his approach, this time using a feint to catch Maria off guard. His movements were faster, more aggressive, but Maria remained composed. In one fluid motion, she sidestepped, turning his momentum against him. It was a textbook example of leverage, timing, and precision. The classroom gasped collectively. Whispers ran through the students: did she just? How is she doing that? Maria's movements were so smooth, so natural, that they almost looked effortless. But those who understood Jiu-Jitsu knew that behind every calm motion was years of discipline, repetition, and study. Marcus' confidence began to waver. He had underestimated her completely. He had mocked her only minutes ago, certain that she would struggle against even basic techniques, and now he realized that he had been completely wrong. His attacks were anticipated, his power redirected, his arrogance mirrored back at him in the form of precise, controlled counters. Every action he took played right into Maria's hands. She didn't rush, she didn't panic. She simply observed, responded, and waited for the perfect moment. The energy in the room shifted again. The students who had laughed moments ago were now leaning in, holding their breath, captivated by the unfolding showdown. Even the instructor watched silently, understanding that this was a rare moment of true mastery being displayed. Maria's calm and patience contrasted sharply with Marcus' fast, aggressive, and confident style. The clash was no longer just physical, it was a battle of mind, strategy, and experience. In a flash, Maria saw the opening she had been waiting for. Marcus' arm extended just a fraction too far, his balance slightly compromised in his attempt to overpower her. With one fluid motion, she moved, positioning herself perfectly. Her hands found the right grip, her legs shifted to leverage his momentum, and within moments, the black belt realized he was caught. Marcus' confident expression faltered, and for the first time, he felt the unexpected sting of being overpowered by someone he had mocked. The students gasped again, some stumbling backward in shock. Maria's movement had been so fast, so precise, that it seemed almost instantaneous. She had turned what appeared to be a simple clash into a masterful demonstration of skill, control, and timing. Marcus struggled, but it was already too late. In mere seconds, Maria's training, patience, and experience had transformed the confrontation from mockery into a moment of awe and respect. As the tension in the room reached its peak, the students watched in disbelief and admiration. The clash that began with arrogance and underestimation had ended with a lesson in humility and mastery. Maria stood firm, calm, and composed, while Marcus struggled to regain his footing, suddenly aware that he had misjudged her entirely. The energy of the class had changed, and everyone present knew that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, a true testament to the power of skill, focus, and experience over mere strength and confidence. The room was silent, every eye locked on the center of the mat. Maria and Marcus had moved from cautious testing to the edge of a full confrontation, and now, all that remained was the decisive moment. Marcus, though a seasoned black belt, could feel for the first time that he was no longer in control. His smirk had faded, replaced with tension as he realized that Maria's calm demeanor hid an almost impossible skill. The clash had shifted in her favor, and the next few seconds would determine the outcome of the challenge that had begun with mockery. Maria moved deliberately, her every action precise and controlled. She had spent decades training for situations just like this, and her mind was focused on one goal: to finish the encounter with confidence, skill, and respect. Marcus, still recovering from the subtle but effective counters Maria had executed moments ago, made a small mistake. He overextended, his balance slightly off, and that was all Maria needed. Her eyes, calm yet intense, locked on the opening. In Jiu-Jitsu, patience is as important as strength, and Maria's patience had brought her to this very moment. With a fluid motion that seemed almost effortless, Maria shifted her weight and adjusted her grip. Her movements were precise, controlled, and lightning fast, but to anyone watching, it seemed graceful and smooth. Marcus realized too late what was happening. The technique Maria had chosen was flawless. She leveraged his momentum, positioning herself so that he could no longer resist without risking injury. Her years of practice, her calm observation, and her mastery of timing had all come together in an almost poetic moment of perfect execution. The students in the room gasped. Some held their mouths in disbelief, others leaned forward, eyes wide, captivated by what was unfolding. The black belt, who had mocked Maria only minutes before, was now completely caught, his strength and skill rendered ineffective by her calm precision and technical mastery. He struggled briefly, attempting to adjust, to regain control, but Maria anticipated every move. Her focus was absolute, her body steady, her mind unshakable. This was the difference between someone who relied on raw power and someone who had trained to master every aspect of the art. In mere seconds, Maria executed the final part of the submission. Her grip tightened, her leverage perfect, and Marcus had no choice but to concede. The black belt tapped out, signaling his surrender. The sound of the tap echoed through the studio, breaking the tense silence. Students erupted in applause, some cheering, some shaking their heads in disbelief. No one had expected such a rapid and skillful conclusion. The old woman who had been mocked, underestimated, and laughed at had achieved what many thought impossible, submitting a black belt in 10 seconds. Marcus, breathing heavily and stunned, looked up at Maria. For the first time that day, there was no smirk on his face. Instead, there was respect and a hint of humility. He extended his hand, acknowledging her skill, and Maria shook it with quiet grace. The room seemed to exhale collectively, the tension dissolving into admiration and awe. The students who had doubted her earlier were now inspired, their perception of skill and strength forever altered. The lesson was clear: technique, experience, and patience could triumph over arrogance and raw power. The instructor, watching from the sidelines, nodded approvingly. This was more than a demonstration of skill, it was a lesson in humility, perseverance, and the power of quiet determination. The entire class had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be talked about for years to come. Maria's victory was not just physical, it was symbolic. She had turned ridicule into respect, mockery into awe, and skepticism into belief. Every student present had learned a lesson far more important than any technique could teach: never underestimate anyone, and always respect the journey and dedication behind true mastery. As Maria stepped back, her movements calm and deliberate, the students clapped and cheered, many still in disbelief at the speed and precision of her submission. Marcus, now humbled, nodded again, silently acknowledging the incredible skill of the woman he had mocked. Maria's presence, quiet yet commanding, had transformed the energy of the room. In just 10 seconds, she had shown that age, size, and appearance mattered little compared to experience, focus, and mastery. The story of this moment would echo far beyond the walls of the studio, a testament to the power of dedication, courage, and skill. The studio erupted in a mix of astonishment and applause. For a moment, it seemed as if time had slowed. Every student, from the youngest beginner to the most advanced practitioner, stared at Maria and Marcus with wide eyes, still processing what they had just witnessed. The air was thick with disbelief, excitement, and a newfound respect. What had begun as a routine class had transformed into a legendary moment that no one present would forget. Some of the younger students who had whispered and laughed moments ago were now completely silent, their expressions a mix of awe and humility. They had expected an easy demonstration for the black belt, a fleeting moment of entertainment at the expense of the elderly woman. Instead, they had witnessed mastery in its purest form. Maria, small in stature but immense in skill, had taken control of the situation in mere seconds, turning the mockery into a lesson that was impossible to ignore. A few students could hardly believe what had happened. "Did she really just submit him in 10 seconds?" whispered one, eyes wide with shock. Another shook his head, muttering, "I've never seen anyone move like that. Ever." Their astonishment was not just at the speed or the effectiveness of the technique, but at the calm, composed, and confident way Maria had executed it. Every movement was deliberate, every decision perfect, and every action had demonstrated years of dedication and discipline. Marcus, still recovering from the shock, sat up slowly, his face a mixture of disbelief, humility, and respect. He was a black belt, used to being admired and feared in the studio, but in that moment, he realized that he had misjudged Maria completely. He had mocked her, assumed she was weak, and counted on his strength and speed to dominate her. Now, he had been shown a lesson he would not soon forget: skill and experience can outweigh youth and power in ways that arrogance can never predict. The instructor, standing quietly nearby, allowed the moment to unfold. He didn't rush to comment or explain. Instead, he let the students absorb what had happened. There was no need for words, the lesson was already clear. Maria's victory was not just physical, it was emotional, psychological, and symbolic. It reminded everyone that true mastery comes from patience, dedication, and respect for the art, not just raw strength or pride. Some students approached Maria cautiously, almost reverently, to congratulate her. "That was incredible," one exclaimed, barely able to contain excitement. "I never imagined anyone could move like that," said another. Maria smiled gently, accepting their admiration but remaining humble. She knew that today was not about showing off, it was about proving that dedication, practice, and belief in oneself could overcome doubt, mockery, and assumptions. Her calm demeanor in the face of ridicule had spoken louder than any words could. Even Marcus, now standing, extended his hand to her with genuine respect. "You're amazing," he said, his voice quieter than usual, stripped of the arrogance he had carried into the encounter. Maria shook it, nodding politely, her eyes still calm and confident. The gesture was more than a handshake, it was an acknowledgement that skill, focus, and humility deserved recognition. In that simple act, a lesson was reinforced for the entire class: respect is earned through mastery and character, not intimidation or showmanship. The energy in the room shifted completely. Where there had once been mockery, laughter, and underestimation, there was now admiration, inspiration, and a renewed focus on learning. Students began practicing with more attention, watching each other carefully, remembering Maria's movements and the calm control she had demonstrated. Her presence had transformed the environment, teaching not just a technique, but a mindset. Patience, respect, and dedication are the foundations of true skill. By the time the class concluded, everyone in the studio had learned something profound. Maria's brief but unforgettable encounter with the black belt had left an indelible mark. The laughter of mockery was replaced with stories of astonishment and inspiration that would be shared for weeks, months, and perhaps even years. In just a few minutes, an old woman had turned doubt into respect, skepticism into admiration, and a simple jiu-jitsu class into a lesson in humility, perseverance, and the power of belief. As the class slowly settled down, the atmosphere had completely transformed. What had begun as a regular jiu-jitsu session filled with laughter, mockery, and casual practice had become a defining moment for everyone present. The students, still buzzing with excitement, replayed the events in their minds. Maria, the elderly woman who had quietly entered the studio, now stood as a symbol of skill, perseverance, and quiet strength. The lesson she imparted went far beyond jiu-jitsu techniques, it was a lesson in life itself. Maria, calm and composed, collected her belongings and prepared to leave the mat. Her movements were deliberate, showing no sign of exhaustion, only grace. She had proven a point not with arrogance, but with skill and confidence, teaching everyone in the room that age, size, or appearance could never define a person's capability. The laughter and mockery that had greeted her earlier had vanished, replaced by admiration, respect, and awe. Even Marcus, the black belt who had underestimated her, watched with a newfound humility. His earlier arrogance had been replaced with understanding, a deep, personal acknowledgement that true mastery comes from dedication, patience, and heart. Students approached Maria one by one, eager to congratulate her and to hear her thoughts. "I've never seen anyone move like that," said a young practitioner, eyes wide with amazement. "It's incredible what you did in just 10 seconds. Maria smiled gently at each comment, her eyes soft yet focused. She offered words of encouragement, reminding them that skill was built over time and that perseverance was more important than speed, size, or raw strength. She spoke not as someone trying to boast, but as a teacher quietly imparting the wisdom that experience grants. Marcus, still slightly shaken by the encounter, approached Maria more formally. "I misjudged you," he said sincerely. "You've shown me what real skill looks like." Maria nodded politely, acknowledging his words. In that small exchange, the black belt learned an invaluable lesson: respect is not given lightly, and arrogance can never substitute for hard work and mastery. What had begun as mockery ended in mutual respect, a transformation that rippled through the entire class. The instructor gathered the students around for a final discussion. He praised Maria's demonstration, emphasizing how her calm, precise, and disciplined approach had turned a moment of ridicule into an unforgettable lesson in humility and technical mastery. "This is what Jiu-Jitsu is about," he said, gesturing toward Maria. "It's not just about strength or speed, it's about patience, focus, and understanding your opponent. What we witness today is a true testament to the power of dedication and experience." The words resonated with everyone, reinforcing the idea that mastery is earned, not assumed. As the students left the studio that day, their conversations were filled not with gossip about the black belt or the mockery that had occurred, but with admiration for Maria and inspiration from her actions. Many reflected on their own training, realizing that humility, patience, and consistent effort mattered far more than showing off or underestimating others. Maria's presence had shifted perspectives, leaving a mark that went beyond the physical skills learned in class. She had shown that respect, focus, and quiet confidence could overcome prejudice, doubt, and even mockery. For Maria herself, the day was just another class, but it had a profound impact on those around her. She walked out of the studio with the same calm grace she had carried in, unaware of the stories that would be told about her feat for months to come. To her, the experience was a continuation of her journey, a reminder that every day of practice, every hour spent perfecting technique, had meaning and purpose. The recognition from her peers was welcome, but not necessary. The true reward was the knowledge that skill and perseverance had triumphed over doubt and ridicule. The story of Maria and the 10-second submission would echo far beyond that jiu-jitsu class. It became a lesson for all who witnessed it: never underestimate anyone, no matter their age, size, or quiet demeanor. True mastery is born from dedication, experience, and patience. Confidence combined with skill can defy expectations, and humility paired with focus can turn even a moment of ridicule into a triumph. Maria's actions reminded everyone that life, like jiu-jitsu, rewards those who practice with heart, who respect themselves and others, and who believe in the power of perseverance. And so, the class ended, but the lesson lingered. In every student's mind, Maria became more than an old woman. She became a symbol, a living reminder that strength, skill, and determination know no bounds, and that true mastery comes not from arrogance or force, but from patience, practice, and an unwavering belief in oneself.